You're just a casual.
Welcome back to another episode of the Casual Experts Podcast. And today's a crazy day. We have one of the most prolific behind-the-scenes people ever in boxing. President of 360 Promotions, Tom Loeffler.
Hall of Famer.
You like?
Eyekon, good to be here.
Yeah.
Mike, good to see you. I like the name of the show, The Casual Experts. So,
Yeah.
We're casuals, but we're experts.
Yeah.
Promise you that. It's a pleasure. I'd like to say that I've been to a couple of boxing shows, right? But I religiously attend 360 promotion events. Mm-hmm. You, Mike, Jason, you guys always treat me well, and I highly, highly appreciate it. My family thanks you. If Mike would go, he would say thanks too.
Yeah.
If I would go, if I would get an invite from you, he tells me, "Oh, yeah, I'm here."
Tell
I'm like,
Mike.
"Oh, that's
Mike?
cool."
Tell Mike.
Yeah. He tells me, "Oh, I'm at the fight right now." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm watching it." He's like, "Oh, you should have came." Where's the message?
Mike's wearing the right hat today. We're here at the world famous Wildcard Boxing Gym.
Yes, we are in Freddie Roach's private gym.
Yes,
Very
yeah.
exclusive. It's fire. I'm going to try to give you a comprehensive, quintessential interview for all of the urban demographic that I have here.
Absolutely.
Tell me, where did you grow up and what was it like growing up there, sir?
You know, I grew up, born and raised here in LA.
Awesome.
Grew up in the Valley in Woodland Hills. Went to El Camino High School and been here all my life. I live out in the west side now in Santa Monica. And true to Southern California.
What's your first introduction to boxing? Like growing up here in LA, like how did you get introduced into boxing?
You know, I was never really a big boxing fan. I remember listening to a Muhammad Ali fight, if you can imagine that, on the car radio one time when he was fighting. But I was more of an NBA, Lakers, Dodgers fan. And I got introduced to boxing through a friend of mine, Harlan Warner. He went to Canoga High School. A good friend of mine, and he was representing icons in the sports memorabilia world. Muhammad Ali was the biggest name of his client list and in the world. Mm-hmm. But he was working with Joe Namath, Sandy Koufax, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown. I mean, the list goes on and on. So anyway, through Muhammad, we were doing deals with Muhammad, you know, when he was doing appearances, licensing, autographs, everything like that. And we had a couple of fighters that wanted to sign with us on the management side. Kevin Kelly was the first one from Flushing, Queens, New York. Mm-hmm. Wound up becoming the WPC featherweight world champion. And then Obakar, the Motor City Car from Detroit, from Emanuel Steward's Kronk Boxing Gym.
Mm-hmm. Rest in peace.
Emanuel Steward, rest in peace for sure. There's a long history with Emanuel Steward, starting with Obakar, but then he came on to train Vladimir Klitschko, and you know his resume of champions is
epic,
unparalleled probably. But Emanuel. I had a lot of times with Emanuel Steward during the training camp, sitting at the bar, listening to stories. You could listen to Emanuel talk for hours on end, you know, about everything that he's experienced, but. That's how I started managing 2 fighters. That grew into 10 fighters. Carlos Navarro was from East LA out here, El Cerdo de Oro. Shane Mosley, I got Shane his world title fight.
Shout out to Shane.
Sugar Shane Mosley. Nobody wanted to fight that guy, and when we signed a contract with him, we guaranteed him actually a world title fight within a year. We said, we'll promise you a world title fight. That's what we brought to the table because the relationship I had with HBO and Kevin Kelly. And so we got Shane his world title fight against Philip Holliday on HBO for the IBF championship with Cedric Kushner. So anyway, those were James Toney. I worked with James Toney for
Legend.
like 4 fights. In fact, I brought Freddie here James here to Freddie to the Wildcard Gym because I remember when James was training at the old Outlaw gym that Freddie was living at the gym. I don't know if a lot of people knew that, but that was Mickey Rourke's gym, and Freddie had an apartment in the gym. So I've known Freddie for years and years in
Mickey
boxing.
Rourke's a big time boxing enthusiast.
Yeah,
to say the least.
he had his own gym, and they had a lot of world champions there. And so anyway, I was up to 10 fighters I was managing, and one of my fighters that I signed, Big Ed Mahone, Ed the Hammer Mahone, was fighting at the LA Forum Boxing, and I got him his world title fight against Vitaly Klitschko in 1999 in Germany. Vitaly had just knocked out Herbie Hyde, won the WBO world title, and I got Ed his world title fight. Vitaly ends up knocking out Ed in the third round. But Vitaly's publicist was friends with me and said, Tom works with Muhammad Ali. I'm always friendly to, whether it's guys I'm working with, whether it's the other people, I always try to be cordial, respectful of everyone that I work with on the show, even with the opponent. So I told Vitaly, if you ever want to come and meet Muhammad at our office if you want to come meet Muhammad at the office, he's welcome to do it. So sure enough, he came over about 6 months later. I set up the meeting with Muhammad Ali, his idol in boxing, and ever since then, we developed a great personal relationship. And then he would run things past me like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? He wasn't that happy with his German promoter at the time. And that was 99. I met him when Mahone fought. Vitaly.
Before we go any further, I have this box in my hand. I just want to give a shout out to the only sponsor for the Casual Experts podcast, and that's Royalty Honey, made in the good US of A. No tariffs involved in this.
Oh,
Royalty Honey.
US made.
I'm
I
not
like
saying that you need it. I'm just saying it'll put a little extra prep in your step,
Little
sir.
pep in the step.
Yep.
Get me ready for Madison Square Garden next week.
Yeah.
I'll take it in the middle of the
right.
bout, and by the time it ends,
By the time it ends,
you'll
you're
be
ready.
ready to go upstairs
Before
to
I'll
your
be ready
suite.
for the championship round or the after party. I guess.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice. Yeah,
You'll be
Royal
ready-
Honey.
you'll be
We're gonna
ready to
try it.
rumble.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
literally.
Like that.
Yeah.
And that ties in what we were talking about with Muhammad Ali. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
bee. Yeah.
And you have
That's
the
great.
Royalty Honey.
Real quick, how did you get into management? Did you go to college and decide you wanted to be in a management type of role, or?
My background is in finance and real estate. My father was a real estate broker here in LA, had his office here on Pico Boulevard in West LA. And that's really the direction I was going into, the real estate market, first as a mortgage banker, then, real estate sales. And then I had the opportunity to become partners with Harlan Warner, who had the management company, the memorabilia company. And that's really, I never really had any formal training in sports. I was a pretty avid sports fan, but no education, my father wasn't in the boxing business, anything like that. It was just like, when we first started out, it was learning a lot of people, meeting a lot of people, learning who you can trust, who you can't trust. The people on the can't trust list has grown exponentially. There's a lot more people you can't trust than the people you can trust in boxing. So that's one of the things I pride my reputation on in the sport of boxing, is like, if my word is my bond. If I say, okay, this is going to happen, it's going to happen. The only other person I know really like that is Mr. Honda in Japan. I don't need a contract. If Mr. Honda says something's going to happen, it's going to happen. So, that's what I pride myself on. But really, the thing that propelled us in boxing was the relationship with Ali, and HBO naturally wanted to do a few things with Muhammad Ali, and that kind of opened the doors with the relationship with HBO, getting Kevin Kelly on HBO, and then it just kind of grew from there. Our reputation and my reputation grew as an honest manager, or someone that, kind of looked after his clients and made sure not only success in the ring, but out of the ring. And then that's how I wound up, with the meeting with Vitaly Klitschko. It actually happened where he was the opponent, but I wound up becoming friends with him. I feel like Vladimir and Vitaly were like brothers to me right now.
Awesome.
And they entrusted me with their career. It took about 4 years after I met them, and then we started K2 Promotions. And my very first promotion, if you can believe this, I was a boxing manager, but the very first promotion that I was ever involved with was 2004. I was with Vitaly when he fought Lennox Lewis, the famous fight at Staples Center. Remember, he had the huge gash on his eye. He was winning the fight. Through 6 rounds, he was winning 4-2. I wish the referee didn't stop it, even though it looked bad. The plastic surgeon that stitched him at that night at Staples Center in one of the locker rooms. I remember 63 stitches, 3 layers of stitches. But the plastic surgeon said it wasn't close to his optic nerve. It wasn't, the orbital bone wasn't broken, so he could have continued. But that's a hard determination to make when you're
in the ring.
ringside doctor. You see all the blood. But he was winning the fight for the heavyweight championship of the world. So usually you let that go on another round or 2. But anyway, so that was a tremendous fight. Got a big reaction here in Los Angeles. That was one of the few fights I've ever seen Vitaly walk in, or a fighter walk in the ring, and the champion. So Lennox Lewis got like 80% of the applause because people knew Lennox as the champion.
Yeah.
Vitaly is a guy from Ukraine. They didn't really know him over here. And by the time Vitaly fought and the blood was coming down his face, and then he jumped on the ropes like, I want to keep fighting. And then the crowd totally changed because he was winning the fight, and it was like 80% for Vitaly as the new guy. So he was kind of like crowned as, the fan favorite here in Los Angeles. Lennox Lewis winds up retiring instead of giving him the rematch. So a year later, Vitaly entrusted his career and his fight with me. The very first promotion I did was at Staples Center. It was on HBO. It was for the WBC Heavyweight Championship of the World. It was live TV internationally, so the pressure was on for never having promoted a fight. I had a lot of relationships in boxing.
Yeah.
I knew the people at HBO because I had so many fighters that have fought on HBO, but that's a big difference between managing fighters and actually promoting the event for the show. With the arena, we had to make the arena deal. We had to do all the publicity. We had to do
It's intense.
the undercard matches. You had to do all the budgets, everything like that. So it actually wound up good. You had to deal with the athletic commission. They were very happy, were very smooth the way everything went. HBO was very happy. Vitaly was happy. He won the heavyweight championship of the world against Corey Sanders. He also passed away. May he rest in peace. But so Vitaly became heavyweight champion. Vladimir was also a heavyweight champion of the world. That was the only 2 brothers ever to be concurrent heavyweight champions ever. The first 2 brothers to have PhDs in boxing. And I actually hold the record now for the most heavyweight championship promotions in this century, in the year 2000, because we did so many fights between Vladimir's iconic run, 25 title defenses, and then all the championship fights that Vitaly did. If I can just touch on a couple stories for Vitaly.
Yeah.
Only fighter I've ever seen where he retired because he had so many injuries. His back was hurting him. He had surgery on his back. His knee was, he had torn ligaments in his knee. He had shoulder was giving him problems. So he retired from boxing. And then 4 years later, he was training in the boxing gym, just kind of testing things out, and he's like, "Oh, this feels pretty good. Everything feels good. The knee feels good. The back feels good. The shoulder's good." And then Fritz, his trainer, Fritz Dunig from Germany, also passed away, unfortunately. May he rest in peace. Said, "Okay, we'll do some sparring and see how you feel." And sure enough, after 4 years, if you can imagine this, so the WBC did an unprecedented move, first time in history, where a champion retired because of his injuries. And then they said, okay, if you retire and let someone else fight for the title, you'll be they anointed him or nominated him to be champion emeritus, which said, Jose Sulaiman at the time said, if you ever want to fight again, you don't have to do any tune-up fights or any, ranking fights. You can fight directly back for your title if you want to. At the time, no one thought he was going to fight again, so it wasn't really something that we were going to enact. But 4 years later, Vitaly said, okay, I feel good. I want to fight again. Sam Peter was the current WBC heavyweight champion at the time. So after 4 years, totally out of the ring, no tune-up fights, no build-up fights, anything like that, Vitaly came and took his title back by knockout in the 8th round in Berlin, Germany, against the current heavyweight champion at the time, Sam Peter. So I've never seen that done before.
That's epic.
That's huge. You know, you see fighters that are injured or out of the ring for a while, and they want a few tune-up fights, and just to see how they feel. And Vitaly went straight into fighting for the heavyweight championship.
What's the difference between the champion in Maraudis and champion in Recess?
So in Recess Emiratis was because he basically retired. In Recess is if you're injured and you can't fight, that means you didn't lose the title, but you're not
able
active.
to defend.
You're not able to defend the title. So that's when you get an interim champion who can fight and be active, and then when the champion in Recess is able to fight again, and then those two fight, the interim champion and then the other champion, they fight to see who's the real champion.
The real champion. Okay.
Which we need more of those fights. We need to instead of having all these different types of champions, just to have like one
don't
world
worry.
champion.
We're gonna cross that bridge a little later.
That's
And so you said the first promotion you did was here in LA at
Staples Center.
And so after that promotion, did that help build like I know you did the flyweight series and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what happened is after going on this run of the most heavyweight championship promotions, we wound up signing. So we did the first fight in 2004. I wound up signing Triple G to K2 Promotions at the time. Fighter out of Kazakhstan. Coincidentally, he had the same German promoter that Vitaly had, that the Klitschkos had. And he was unhappy with that promoter. So he got out of his promotional contract. We wound up signing Triple G in 2011. Got him his first fight in America. He fought a couple times in Panama because there were still some legal issues with the former promoter. Once that got settled, we had the meeting with all the U.S. TV companies, Showtime, HBO, Epix at the time was in boxing. And it was a very simple pitch. I told them, here's Gennady Golovkin from Kazakhstan. A lot of them didn't even know where Kazakhstan was. The only reference to Kazakhstan at the time was Borat. You know, Triple G, his English was a third language, so it wasn't. He didn't speak perfect English, and I said he'll fight. He's the world champion. He'll fight anyone. He doesn't need a lot of money. He just wants to be on HBO or on TV. It looked like we were going to have a Showtime date first, and then that fell out, and then he wound up getting the HBO date. And September 2012, and then ever since then, he went on this
Epic run.
Huge run of just knocking guys out in the ring. Anyone we set up with him, he was knocking out.
Before we get too far ahead into the Triple G epic run, to say the very least, that you guys had, I want to ask you two questions. The first one is what is your favorite memory with Muhammad Ali?
With Muhammad Ali, I have a few memories, if I could share them. I actually set up a trip for Muhammad to go to Germany when the Will Smith movie came out, the Ali movie, starring Will Smith. And I set up the premiere in Germany.
That's awesome.
The German premiere with Muhammad. And we had a connection or a friend that was friends with a mayor of a little bit smaller city. That was still back where, it was East Germany, West Germany. The unification happened, but East Germany was still trying to kind of build up to compete with West Germany. And there was a city in East Germany, I remember Riesa, and they produced a brand new Volkswagen, it's called Photon model car. And they wanted to get Muhammad Ali, the most famous person in the world, most famous athlete in the world,
to say
for
the
the premiere in Riesa instead of Berlin or Frankfurt or Munich or wherever, one of the bigger cities. So it created a huge publicity over there, having Muhammad Ali in the smaller city. And we were there for about 3 days, I remember, and we landed, and Muhammad has Parkinson's and the whole thing, jet lag, and we had some sponsorship meetings throughout the day before the premiere. And we're going into the hotel. It's kind of late at night. Like I said, jet lag, and his wife Lonnie's like, Muhammad, let's go through. We go to the room. You need to go. You need to sleep so he could be fresh for the next day for the premiere. And Muhammad sees all these German fans lined up on both sides. They had the the ropes kind of tied off there going into the lobby, And there was such emotion because these German boxing fans remember Muhammad Ali watching him fight with their parents, waking up like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. Father might not have been there anymore, currently when they saw their idol, Muhammad Ali, or their father's idol. So, they were like crying when they saw him. It makes me kind of emotional to think about it. But like Muhammad said, he just started signing autographs. He's like, nope, I'm going to stay. He just like started signing. And so he was like down there for like an hour. And Lonnie's like, we need to go up, take your medication, the whole thing. And he had such a connection with the fans there because he knew that was going to be like the last time they ever got to see him. Yeah. And it was so emotional for the fans to meet such an idol of theirs that they grew up, maybe, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, 10 years old, watching the fights with their father on TV in Germany, which was kind of illegal at the time to watch American TV, but they did. And so that was a great moment with Muhammad. And one other moment I'll share is when he was doing a signing in Atlantic City. And we walked into the casino, I think it was Bally's Casino, and you know how casinos are loud, the slot machines are going, and the roulette table and the craps table, everyone's yelling, and it's just like people at the bar drinking, whatever. And Muhammad said this line to us one time that said, because the security's like, do you want to go in the back door and then go up the elevators and go to your room? And he's like, spent my whole life trying to be famous. So why would I now go hide from the people? Like he really was the people's champion. He really was. He really appreciated his fans. And that's what I try to instill on all the young fighters, all the young athletes that I come across or I work with. Said if Muhammad Ali could do it, if he can take an hour, 2 hours out of his time signing autographs, he wasn't getting paid for it. That was the premiere in Germany. He was just signing it because he saw the connection, felt the connection with the fans and saw the emotion. Then you can do that because a lot of fighters like, you know what, I'm too tired, I'm too busy to this or whatever to go out and meet the fans. And it's critical for your career to build it up. And I say, if Ali could do it, you could do it too.
Be able to.
I remember with Triple G, I would tell him, like every time we'd go through the airport, we'd fly to do an appearance or to one of the fight nights or whatever it was. I said, every autograph you sign, every picture you take, that's one more pay-per-view buy. It's almost like kind of, not that he didn't want to do it, but I wanted to like relate it to, now you have a lifelong fan. If you take your time, take 5 minutes out of your schedule and sign an autograph or just even 1 minute to sign an autograph and take a photo with the fan, I mean, they'll remember that forever. So Muhammad said that line, and then we walked in the front door of the lobby, and then the people in the lobby checking in and the registration and everything, they look around, they're like, oh, that's Muhammad Ali. I mean, literally the most recognized person in the world. They said if you could drop Ali anywhere in the world, whether it's the deepest part of Africa, Japan, the Philippines, Europe, wherever, like Ali. People would recognize who Muhammad Ali is.
Yeah.
He was so well known, and it still is so well known. And so, like everyone, people start turning, and it was like a wave going through the casino where people in the lobby, and then the people like at the slot machines, you can hear like the slot machines were like quieting down, and the people at the tables, it was like just a wave. And then it kind of it was like kind of eerie. It was like quiet. And then all of a sudden they started chanting Ali, Ali, and it was just
that's
like
crazy.
I mean, that's the only person I know that can have that type of an effect on a group of people that don't even know him.
Yeah.
I mean, know him, but don't have a personal connection to him. And it was amazing. And it's interesting how he was. Remember when he was coming up, and he was kind of like braggadocious and considered a loudmouth and everything like that, and a lot of people dismissed him when he was talking so much, or he had the poetry, like so eloquent what he was doing. But then with the Parkinson's, when he couldn't speak that clearly or that well anymore, it's just like he had such a bigger effect on people, without even saying anything. Just his presence were there. I mean, you could just feel the chills, and you get just chills being around him. And it was those are like the highlights of I have so many championship fights that I've been involved with, the heavyweight champions and Triple G and everything like that. But like dealing with Muhammad Ali, that was like
crazy.
That was like you can't compare it to anything else.
No, absolutely not. The second question I wanted to ask is, And I'd like to start off by saying I regret that I wasn't as into boxing as I am now, having met Mr. Roach, having met Mr. Garcia, you speaking with Coach Diaz, etc. What was it like being around, working with, sharing drinks with the legendary Emanuel Steward?
Emanuel Steward, wow, that talk about a history of boxing. All the fighters that he dealt with, all the fights that he was at, and then with his HBO commentary, it was that was an amazing time as well. I remember, the Klitschkos had this training camp in Austria. I have to give a shout out to the Stangelwert Hotel up in the Austrian Alps. It's still my favorite hotel in as many countries as cities I've been in the world. That's my favorite hotel in the world. It's a 5-star resort in the Austrian Alps, but it's like it started out as a barn with horses, and it just built on and on and on from there. And it's just like you have a view of the Alps from there.
It's awesome.
And the best fitness hotel around. That's why the Klitschkos chose it as their training center. So, they'd be up there for 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And then a lot of times after the training, I'd sit down with Emanuel. He'd like to sit at the bar, talk to the people, and I'd be sitting next to him and just listening to him for hours talking boxing. He had stories from every different thing that you can, every different angle that you can imagine. And he liked to tell the stories, and he liked to talk to the bartenders or the people, the guests that came up to talk to him. Also very friendly, very gregarious, likable guy. So yeah, there was some great times with Emanuel Steward for sure. I have actually an interesting story to build on that.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Banks was one of the main sparring partners for Vladimir.
Okay.
So Emanuel was supposed to come. He had already been sick. He wasn't telling anyone how sick he was. He had cancer. And he's like, okay, why don't you start out, start without, Jonathan kind of knows the procedures or the training methods, whatever, because he basically grew up at Emanuel's house. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan was a cruiserweight and then became the main sparring partner for Vladimir. And then it turned out that, sure enough, Emanuel wasn't going to make it. So then we had to make a choice, or Vladimir basically had to make the choice. Okay, what are we going to do now? We're going to bring in another trainer, a world-class trainer, or what are we going to do? And he's like, you know what? JB's been doing a great job. He knows Emanuel's methods. He knows the techniques. He's watched the sparring. He knows how to set everything up. He's like, okay, then JB is going to wind up training him. So unfortunately, Emanuel wound up passing away. And I think it was like 2 weeks before the fight. So Jonathan winds up training the heavyweight champion of the world, never trained a fighter before, but winds up training Vladimir Klitschko, wins the heavyweight championship fight, and then Jonathan had a fight booked a week later in Atlantic City against Seth Mitchell on Showtime, if you remember that. So Seth Mitchell was the favorite. So Jonathan won the heavyweight championship in the corner as a trainer, and a week later, he winds up winning on Showtime, knocking out Seth Mitchell. I think it was in the second round. Like just something
crazy.
Like unbelievable that I've never seen before accomplished. But that kind of circles it back with Emanuel Steward. Like there's no way he could have ever filled his shoes, but Vladimir wound up winning, and then JB wound up becoming his full-time trainer after that, and continuing that streak that Vladimir went on with the heavyweight championships.
Dang.
It's
crazy.
It was a little bit sad just thinking about,
No, absolutely.
But it's just a wild story because going from there to our current state of boxing with it's so different now. Especially with the influencer boxing, and you have all these things coming around. Like, what's your perspective on the current state of boxing? Like coming from that.
The evolution.
Well, what we're trying to do, with the support of Dana White and UFC Fight Pass is we put on competitive fights. Dana loves the fights that we put on. And if you look at it, we try to model our shows on the UFC model, where you have competitive fights from the beginning. You've been to the shows at the Commerce Casino. The fans come early.
Facts.
They're loud. And the early fights, sometimes you get the early fights are like the fight of the night.
They're some of the best fights.
Got to give a shout out to Charles Boziger, our matchmaker, that he puts on great matches, whether it's a 4-round fight, a 6-round fight. It's always a competitive fight, and the fans love that. And there's no huge breaks in between. So what we're trying to model on UFC Fight Pass is just put on great value for the fans, both live and watching worldwide on the telecast. And, that model's working. And that's what I think boxing needs. Sometimes you see these pay-per-view shows and there's longer gaps in between the fights than the fights are lasting themselves. And the fans don't want to see, the podcasters or the commentators talking. They want to see the guys fighting in the ring. And that's what Dana has, really emphasizes that, and he does that with the UFC. He just goes fight by fight by fight, great fights, put on great fights early on. And you see a UFC show. I've been to a number of UFC shows now. And the fans show up there early too. It's like boxing. You go to a big pay-per-view event up in Vegas, and the arena's half empty. You're looking around, and you're thinking, "Oh, they didn't do that well on ticket sales." Yeah. As soon as the main event walks in, it's totally sold out. You're like, "Oh, okay." So the fans are only coming for the main event, or a lot of times they're like invited guests from the casino. So like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. Let's go see Canelo fight or whoever. Let's go see the fight." But they don't care about the undercard fighters, and I think that's what needs to change in boxing, and that's what we're really making a big effort into doing that on our side.
Was that a conscious decision, like when you created 360, or was that just like from experience with the K2 promotions and being involved in all these fights, and then building that relationship with Dana? Was that a conscious decision on your, or was that like a mutual? It was
a mutual thing. I mean, that was the guarantee that we made, or the promise we made to Dana is he gave us the Fight Pass dates. Mm-hmm. We broke all the records for boxing ratings on UFC Fight Pass, so he was happy about that. Then he kept giving. The first year he gave us 4 dates. Second year we had eight dates. Last year we had 10, and this year we're going to do a monthly show, 12 dates. And every show you can see, like with Callum Walsh, Omar Trinidad, Sergey Bohachuk's been on the Hollywood Fight Nights series. So we're building the future champions. You can argue that Bohachuk is a champion. Right now, it's just
he's a star nonetheless. Like he might not be a champion on paper right now, but he's definitely a star. Yeah, especially after the performance of Virgil, like he's a star no matter what.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, so that was a commitment we made with Dana, and it works. I got to give Mike a lot of credit, who he keeps emphasizing. This is how it's got to run. We need to have fighters that are going to bring in fans to the shows, and it's a good mix. And I think we've taken over the Southern California market between Commerce Casino and Chumash Casino, and then we did the show in Dublin. We had 5,000 loud fans for Callum Walsh.
That was awesome.
Now next week we're going to March 16th, St. Patrick's show, the third time. St. Patty's weekend, third time Callum Walsh has fought at Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. So we're excited about that. But Callum's like the fastest rising star in boxing right now because of his training with Freddie Roach. If you don't win in the ring, you don't look good in the ring. There's not much you can do outside the ring. Yeah. That's what I said with Triple G. That's why it was such a great synergy with him. It's like Abel Sanchez, had a really hardcore training camp up in Big Bear. It was just like eat, sleep, fight, train, spar, run, and then just do the next thing. The next day, same thing. And so I told Gennady, we'll open the doors for you. We got him the date on HBO. We got him his fight at Madison Square Garden. We got him the fight at the O2 Arena. I mean, he's selling at all these arenas. I said, we'll keep opening the doors for you, but, you need to perform in the ring. And that's what he was doing. He was knocking everybody out. Everyone that said, all the East Coast haters, there were a lot of East Coast guys saying, because Abel's out here in the West Coast, and it was like, oh, this guy, at first it was Curtis Stevens. Remember Curtis Stevens? Like at Madison Square Garden, okay, he's going to expose him. And then he winds up knocking him out in the 8th round. Then it was like Matthew Macklin. Macklin was a world-class fighter. Winds up knocking him out with one punch that broke his ribs and the thing. So every time, Daniel Geale, if you remember that, he got hit square in the face, and he wound up hitting him a split second later and knocking out Geale. David Lemieux, it was the first champion that because they dared to get in the ring with Triple G, and sold out Madison Square Garden. If you can imagine, a fighter from Kazakhstan who English is his third language. It's not like he's out there, giving these lengthy interviews, but, he's a likable guy. Whatever he says in English, at least the American fans appreciated that he was trying to speak English, or that he was speaking English, even though it wasn't perfect English. Then you have David Lemieux from Canada. So it's not like Puerto Rico, it's not like Ireland, it's not like your typical like Madison Square Garden fighters demographic. And we sold out Madison Square Garden, 2 champions fighting each other, and Gennady basically controlled that whole fight with his jab. He had a great jab, and selling out the Garden, having the Canelo fights. We did the first Canelo fight. We did over $27 million at the gate. It was the 3rd highest fight ever in Nevada history. When you think of all the Tyson fights,
the fights,
all the Oscar De La Hoya fights,
the Mayweather fights,
the Mayweather fights. If you can imagine. The 3rd highest out of all those, again, Gennady from Kazakhstan, Canelo from Mexico, and when you put but they both had huge fan bases. You put those fan bases together, and it was tremendous. We did over 1 million pay-per-view buys, and that was a tremendous success. So,
what do you think? Before you continue, and I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on the outcome of each of those 3 fights?
Oh my! It's hard to go back and rehash it, but I think it's pretty clear. I mean, of course, I'm on the Triple G side, but I don't think you can make an argument if you really break it down round by round. And there are people that have broken it down and how many punches were landed and everything like that. And that's what the judges don't get. If you give them the benefit of the doubt, they don't get the benefit of instant replay.
Yeah.
If sometimes they're on one side of the ring, I think the one judge was like shielded by the referee the whole fight, because there was one judge that actually gave the first fight 10 rounds of 2. To Canelo, if you can imagine that. But I think he clearly won the first fight. Not clearly. I mean, they were all competitive, but he won the first fight. I mean, HBO had it scored 8-4. I would agree with that. Harold Letterman, neutral, because both were HBO fighters. I think he won the first fight. I think he won the second fight, maybe not 8-4, maybe 7-5. I would have been happy with a draw, 6-6. But they wound up giving the second fight to Canelo, and then I would say he lost the third fight legitimately because he was already past his prime. He was already. You could argue that he was past his prime already in the second fight, because Canelo, if you remember, he vacated the title the very first time they were supposed to fight, 2016. Vacated the title. He actually holds the distinction of the only Mexican champion to ever vacate a WBC title, because he didn't want to fight Triple G. But then a year later, in 2017, they wound up fighting. I was convinced Triple G was going to win. I was, sure that he won the decision, but he wound up getting a draw in the first fight. But, it's a great history. It takes 2 to tango. They both had, not taking anything away from Canelo. It was just, I thought that Triple G won the first fight. You mean Canelo's gone on to have other tremendous fights. You can make the argument that he's the most popular fighter in boxing right now. He's the face of boxing. He sells out arenas. He sells pay-per-views. Whatever you want to say, whether you think he won that fight or lost the fight. I mean, look, Canelo lost against Floyd, and that didn't hurt his marketability.
Not at all. No.
And that was another thing that Dana said, is that, the UFC model is if you put on a competitive fight, a great fight, 2 months later, 3 months later, you might see that even if a fighter loses, you might see that fighter back on the telecast, on the main program.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because he put on a great fight.
Absolutely.
And that's what we tell fighters. Like, look, if you take a tough fight and you wind up losing, because these young guys have to be in competitive fights. It doesn't do. Callum's right now 12-0 with 10 knockouts. It doesn't do any good to give him 12 easy opponents, and then by the time he fights for a world title, he's going to be totally overwhelmed. And we've seen that. I've seen that before so many times. A guy that's 20-0, 25-0, and then has a competitive fight, and then is like in deep waters because he hasn't had that experience in the ring. And I think Callum's been brought up tremendously well. Got to give the matchmaking a lot of credit for that, but also, on the marketability side, like I said, if you have Dana White in your corner, supporting him on the promotion, on the social media side, whenever Dana does a video or a post about Callum Walsh, I mean, it has such a tremendous reaction. Then Freddie Roach on the trading side, I open the doors on the promotion side, and it's really a tremendous tripod that Callum.
Yeah, it's a sick trifecta.
That Callum has. One writer actually. East Coast writer actually asked me when we were talking about Callum, and he's like, yeah, but because he's like, okay, you built Triple G, we did all the Superfly shows with Chocolatito, the Klitschkos, Shane Mosley, but that was all on HBO. He's like, okay, you don't have HBO now to build Callum. And I said, yeah, but if you think of all the followers that Dana has, well, I think it's over 40 million now that UFC has only on their Instagram. I said, I'd rather have that. I mean, there's no question HBO created stars. They created Floyd.
No, absolutely.
You know, Oscar was on HBO, Triple G, Shane, you know, those
a lot of us grew up to HBO boxing.
But we're in a different world now. We're in a streaming world.
You know, social media.
Yeah, we're on a phone world.
Yeah.
Social media,
so
streaming.
Being able to watch UFC Fight Pass on your phone and seeing these fight like it's different.
But that's where that was my point with Callum Walsh. Whenever Dana gets behind, you know, doing a post about him or talks about him fighting, or UFC does, it goes worldwide. And on social media, you get it clicked and you can see it again. You get it again. You can share it with your friends. You know, that's like the instant gratification that you have in this fast-moving social media world. And I would rather have that than you know, the traditional way that I mean, boxing was great when it was on network TV. You turn on ABC Wild Water Sports and you see a world championship fight, and it's like it doesn't get any better than that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But then it went to HBO and Showtime, which were smaller audiences. Then, you know, it's going to streaming services, smaller audiences. So it really is the social media that you need to promote the fighters, and I think that's what gives us a great advantage with UFC Fight Pass.
And with following with the UFC and that whole model is you're building a reputation. So when you go to a 360 event at the Commerce Casino, you know you're going. You might not know the undercard, but you know you're going. You're going to see good fights, and so when you're building that reputation, that's going to bring eyes to these fighters. And then these fighters, they put on performances, win or lose. You're going to gain a fan, because as a boxing fan, as a fight fan, you're going to these events and you're looking at it like, I'm going to watch fights. Yeah. So if I see a good fight, I'm like, who's this guy? Like, and then you start following him, because when they come out, you see their Instagram on the screen. You're like, oh, I'm following. Like he put on a good performance.
Absolutely.
But you're going. It's about building a reputation. That's how you're building the fighters. Well, and that's how you're building fights. So win, lose, or draw, you're going to gain some fan.
That's what Dana's accomplished on the UFC side. The UFC brand is bigger than any of the fighters, because a mixed martial arts fan or a combat sports fan that goes to a UFC fight or UFC event, it's really a whole production. The way the energy builds, you got Bruce Buffer in the ring there, and you know, but they know it doesn't matter who's fighting that night, it's going to be a great fight night. They have so many fights, and from the beginning fights, you know, great fights. They got great female fights. I've also been a big advocate for female boxing, but you know, that's what my goal is, to build Hollywood Fight Nights into this brand where anyone that comes, just like you said, anyone comes to a show, they might not know some of the undercard fighters, but they know it's going to be a great show.
Absolutely.
At Chumash Casino up there by Santa Barbara, it's sold out every time, because they know now it's going to be competitive fights. You know, before it was like, you know, the promotion wasn't that great, and now the fans realize, okay, now 360 is going up there to Chumash. We're doing 4 shows a year, have a great relationship with them, and really appreciate their support. But the fans know when the Chumash casino guests get invited, or the boxing fans buy a ticket, they know if they're going to a 360 fight night, it's going to be a great show.
Before we get too far ahead, I would just like to ask again, what would be about another favorite memory this time? What would your favorite memory be with, or a couple, if you have some, with the legendary Triple G?
The legendary Triple G, yeah. We really brought him from not being known in the United States at all, except for the hardcore. Like Doug Fisher said he knew him before he went on HBO, but really wasn't known to a mainstream sports
to a
fan.
casual, you wouldn't know. No. Only the experts know.
That's right. So with him, there's so many memories with Triple G too. I think one of the ones that stands out is that we brought him. So he fought, the first HBO fight was in Turning Stone, New York. That I didn't have control of that show. That was Artie Palula. It was his date. It's kind of a long story how Triple G got on that show, because he was supposed to fight the Russian fighter that was undefeated at the time. Forget his name, but anyway, he was another champion. That guy wound up getting hurt. Then the opponent changed. But anyway, so that was a great start, having Triple G on HBO. The response HBO got is like, all their subscribers is like, oh, I want to see Triple G again. And then he fought Rosado at the Garden. Then he fought Curtis Stevens at the Garden. It was at the theater at the Garden. And so when we brought him out to LA, we brought him out to StubHub at the time. against Marco Antonio Rubio, which, you know, he was a known name in the Hispanic community with the Mexican fans, but it wasn't like
Julio Cesar Chavez. I get it.
like a Chavez type of name. Even Chavez Jr. wasn't like, wasn't that type of name.
That's his favorite fighter.
Right.
So we didn't know how it was going to sell. I always try to price tickets reasonably. My philosophy is you'd rather have fans
Volume.
in the arena. You want the energy. You want the fans. You want the promotion. You want the publicity, everything like that. Instead of just trying to maximize the dollars, you know, I priced it really low. And sure enough, the thing sold out. It holds 7,000 seats. We sold out the 7,000 seats like 3 weeks ahead of the event, which was unheard of for StubHub. And then we added 2,000 additional seats. Triple G holds the record for that venue. It was StubHub. Now I think it's called Dignity Health Center. And he holds the record for the most attendance of that venue of we put 9,000 people in a 7,000 seat arena. So that was a huge statement, like coming home to my hometown here in Southern California with Triple G, with HBO, and having that type of success and that type of, you know, just the fans really came to see him and they really appreciated him. And that's when, you know, I designed the walkout. No one had ever done that before, but he walked all the way around the StubHub on the floor. And I said, you know, you need to go around and acknowledge these fans that came to buy a ticket to come see you fight. So sure enough, he walked around. Security was freaking out. They're like, how are we gonna protect them? I'm just like, you just make sure as long as no one throws a bottle or something.
He'll be fine.
You know, this was before the fight. This is not after. This is not a victory lap. This is before the fight, going into the ring, like building up for the emotion. And he walked around, you know, was you know, touching people's with his gloves and, you know, acknowledging the fans and waving at the fans, and the fans were going crazy. You could feel like the energy going around StubHub Center. So that was great. Another one was Madison Square Garden when he fought David Lemieux. Got his first unification fight. I mean, there's so many highlights. One time, you know, outside the ring, we have a very close relationship with Mauricio Suleiman, and Mauricio set up a ring from the president of WBC, set up an appearance in Mexico City because I told Gennady, you know, you need to go down there, build up your fan base in Mexico with the Mexican fans.
He's an honorary Mexican, so
and he had a Mexican trainer, but he fights Mexican style. But you know, the Mexican fans just appreciated his offensive style as far as how exciting he was in the ring. He was knocking people out. He wasn't dancing. You see a lot of fighters just trying to win a 10-round decision, 12-round decision. That wasn't Triple G. He was coming like a wrecking ball. And so there were two things down there in Mexico City. One was he visited a children's cancer ward. Wasn't a paid appearance. It was just there, you know, the newspapers were there, everything like that. But, you know, he walked in and there was this little girl crying. And he walked over to her and he touched her and like she stopped crying. It was like another emotional moment. Was just like, she doesn't really know who he was, but he had his world championship belt and he laid the belt on her lap. And like, it was just like such a touching moment, you know. Cool. The effect that you have as a world champion, as a representative, or as an ambassador of the sport of boxing. I mean, that says it right there. It's like, you know, it's like basically your obligation to go and do good things for the community, and that's what happened with Triple G. And the other one was he had donated a good amount of money to the Mexican relief fund. Remember, they had the big earthquake down there, earthquake relief fund down there in Mexico City. And because of that, they actually introduced him with his belt on the field at an NFL football game down there. Remember, it was the Raiders versus the Patriots. And he was on the field with all these other Mexican heroes, legendary Mexican athletes, and they're people like, why is Triple G on the field? Like they were like watching it, and yeah, because he was adopted by the Mexican community, and he supported, you know, he gave a financial donation to the earthquake relief fund. So it was those were some great highlights of his career.
So yeah, he definitely contributed to the cause.
Yeah,
I want to touch on. So going from like building these fighters up and promotions and now having 360 where you're building up fighters from the ground up, and you're like, what's the strategy like when you're scouting these fighters, when you're looking at fighters? Like, what do you look at? Particularly, what do you see that catches your eye for like a Pacific fighter?
I've worked with so many fighters. You know, they really have to. I mean, they have to have talent in the ring. When you're working with someone who's making their pro debut or only has like 3 or 4 or 5 fights, you don't know how they're going to be once they get into a world-class level of top 10, you know, fighting another top 10 rated fighter.
Yeah.
You know, you can see the skill, the talent they have, the dedication. It's important. They need to be dedicated. Otherwise, you know, boxing, the famous saying is you don't play boxing. If you're not dedicated, if you're not training as hard as you can to your best abilities, boxing's not for you. You should go out and get a job somewhere else, you know, that you're not getting hit in the head. It's a dangerous sport. And, so you need to have the commitment, the dedication. You need to have the talent in the ring, but you also need to have the character outside the ring.
Yes.
I don't want to work with a fighter that's like, you feel like you're going to work and it's like, oh, no, I got to see them again. You know, it's like, you know, you just don't want, you want to have a good chemistry. The fighter needs to have a good chemistry with his trainer, but also with the promoter, because you know I'm spent, like, especially with Triple G, it was like 24 hours a day. I was getting calls from Europe, I was getting calls from New York, I was getting calls from here. I could tell from the time zone, like what time the calls were coming in, where they were from. And you know, there's no weekends, there's no holidays. It's like you're always working. And if you're going to spend that much time committed to building someone, or the same thing with the Klitschkos, you know, there was, like, when I promoted that first fight at Staples Center, it was literally 4 weeks, but I mean, it was a lot longer promotion, but 4 weeks where it was just like nonstop at the office till 12 o'clock, waking up. Sometimes I'd sleep in the office, waking up 6 o'clock in the morning. I was back at the office. It was like nonstop. And if you're going to make that type of a sacrifice to promote an event or promote a fighter, you want to like the fighter you're working with.
Absolutely.
And so you hear of all these stories about, you know, fighters getting in trouble or getting arrested, or, you know, calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, DUIs or whatever. It's like, you know, that's not for me. You know, they might be great fighters, but that's not for me. I've been doing this long enough where it's I don't want to work with guys who are committed, who are representing the sport of boxing well. You look at Callum, has great charisma. You look at Sergey Boachuk, what Sergey went through being in his home country of Ukraine while it was being in. Can you imagine your country being invaded by a nuclear power of Russia? I mean, literally, there were missiles flying over his city, and I mean, what he went through to get out of Ukraine, to get his visa, had to wait to get his visa, had to go to Poland first, and I mean, that's a whole, that could take up a whole segment of this. But I mean, I'm just talking to the character now. When you listen to him speak, like, he's fighting for his people, fighting for Ukraine. You listen to Omar Trinidad, you know, representing Boyle Heights. You know, I mean, such a great representative of the sport of boxing. There's so many great athletes. And those are the people that you enjoy working with.
So you would say, like, when you see a fighter and you see the passion that they have for the sport, that's kind of what attracts you to these young fighters, maybe to...
That's a lot of what it is, and we need the sign off from the trainer. You know, Freddie Roach gave his stamp of approval on Callum Walsh. That's all we needed. We saw him spar a couple times. Freddie said, this is one of the most talented young fighters I've ever worked with, or I've ever seen, and one of the hardest punching fighters that he's ever had on the mitts. And you know, when you have Freddie Roach saying something like that, that's all you need to hear. That's the same thing Abel Sanchez told me that about Triple G. When people were like, they weren't sure who he was or whatever, but Abel said, and Abel's had like 22 world champions of his own. When Abel said, this is the hardest punching guy that I've ever felt on the mitts, I don't need much more than that. And, you know, outside of all the other things, I don't need much more than that. So, you know, it definitely is. You need to have that endorsement from the trainer, and also the trainer saying, yeah, this guy's making sacrifice. This person, I shouldn't say guy, because we work with a lot of female fighters. We work with Roxy, right out of here, out of Wildcard Boxing Gym. We work with Lupita Medina, trained by Manny Robles.
Yeah, Babyface.
Babyface Assassin. Sergey Boachuk trains with Manny Robles. So, no, I mean, those are the type of world-class trainers that you need in your corner, and that we look for their certification of, okay, yeah, this is a very talented fighter.
I know here at 360, it's a very close-knit family. I'm very happy to be an extended member of that family.
Yeah, that's right.
I know loyalty is really big here, and I think it's very. Well, I'm going to just speak how I speak. I think it's very dope that you brought Abel on as like a commentator, considering I don't think Abel needs to be commentating per se, but you brought him along, you gave him a spot. I'm sure that's your lifelong friend at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
No, I appreciate it. Look, with all those Triple G fights, all the trips that we were taking all around the world to boxing conventions, he fought in Monaco 3 times. If you can imagine fighting in the ring and having the Prince of Monaco, Prince Albert, there, part of the royal family. I mean, that's a big deal fighting over there. So, but that's what I value about boxing. Like Kevin Kelly, the very first fighter I've ever worked with, he lives in Las Vegas now, and every time I go to Las Vegas, I always try to go out of my way to see how Kevin's doing, because he's a very likable guy. But I always appreciate, like, without him, I wouldn't be where I am. It's like building blocks, and you look at how you can affect. Not only do you need a talented fighter, but that fighter needs an opportunity. You look at Callum Walsh. Callum Walsh was working on the fishing boats. Yeah, he was a successful amateur, but he had no intention of coming to LA and turning pro.
Yeah.
It was like during the pandemic, everything was shut down in Ireland. I mean, a lot of things were shut down here too. But his father lived out here in California. He came to visit him, and then while he was here,
boom, boom.
It's like, okay, I'll go check out Freddie's gym and see if he'll let me train. And he came over here. Freddie, can I train? He's like, yeah, you can train, but today's sparring day. If you're going to train, you need to spar. Boom. Okay, all of a sudden he's an amateur sparring with a professional. He's fighting 3-round fights. He's sparring 6 rounds with a professional. And then Freddie says, okay, that was good, kid. You can come back tomorrow. And from then on, Freddie's trained him. But that's the opportunity that, okay, so now he's got Freddie. Then Freddie, we have a great relationship with Freddie, and Freddie's like, yeah, you take a look at this Irish kid. I think he's really going to be special. Okay, we put him on pro debut. Looks good. We like Callum, like what he represents. Fly up to Vegas, set up a meeting with Dana. Dana got a great Irish champion. Irish amateur, 6-time national champion. Trains with Freddie. Dana knows Freddie from Boston, the old Boston days. Dana used to train at Freddie's father's gym in Boston, so they go way back. So set up the meeting with Dana. Dana likes him right away. I could see kind of flashes of Conor McGregor success, an Irish guy, good-looking Irish kid, very
quick-witted,
marketable, personable, charismatic. He's got that Irish charm, and so Dana's like, okay, let's put him on UFC Fight Pass, and then boom, so we got that. But that just shows you the opportunity. Callum might have gone back home, might have gone back on the fishing boats.
That would have been it.
Might have. You never know if he would have ever turned pro at that time, because he kind of comes from a humble background where he had to work to support himself. Another perfect example is Omar Trinidad.
Shout out to Omar.
One of my favorite fighters. I call him like the blue collar fighter, where all he needed was that opportunity.
Him versus Ochoa is what actually brought me to 360.
That was
your guys' build up for that fight. I was like, what the is this? I'm coming along. I'm getting on board with this.
Blowing up your social media, right? Yeah. And that was a great rivalry here in LA. But you just give him the opportunity, and Omar's another guy like Triple G or like Callum. When the stage gets bigger, when the challenge is better in the ring, when the lights get brighter,
he steps up.
Now he's number 2 in the world, a WBC Continental America's champion. And all he needed was those opportunities. He wasn't buried on the undercard somewhere. Now he's headlining Commerce Casino.
Facts.
He's one of the we call him the King of LA, because he brings such a crowd with him. Like, an Omar Trinidad fight is a can't miss fight. If you want a can't miss fight, that guy is pure entertainment from the first bell to. A lot of his fights don't see the last bell, but it's nonstop.
His signature move when he lays on top of the
top of the ropes, and that's the thing. So. It's giving them the right opportunity as well to let them blossom.
Yeah.
Triple G, actually, a lot of people don't realize this, but he was so frustrated with his situation in Germany. He wasn't making money. He wasn't getting a world title fight, which he wanted. He was very close to just going back to Kazakhstan and not turning professional, because as a successful amateur, he was an amateur world champion. He was an Olympic silver medalist. With those type of amateur credentials, you can pretty much live off of that, become involved in like the government sports program and get paid that way and get paid by sponsorships. And he was like, if the opportunity didn't happen with Abel Sanchez, the opportunity didn't happen with HBO, he probably would have been back there and never had continued his professional career because he was so frustrated with what happened. And he was with one of the biggest promoters in Germany on big TV channels, but they just weren't pushing him. And then you just give a guy like that an opportunity, and another one that just jumped through and took advantage of every opportunity we gave him.
I'd also like to say real quick that I'm aware that you got him. He's the first athlete that was sponsored by Michael Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Actually, on the boxing side, the third. Yeah, first from Kazakhstan.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I'll tell you the first two, and you can maybe understand the difference between Triple G's. The first one was the great Roy Jones.
Of course.
Tremendous amateur, tremendous world champion. Second one, Andre Ward, Olympic gold medalist, world champion. And then you have Triple G from Kazakhstan. Those are the three athletes that are sponsored by Jordan. All tremendous athletes, but we really had to spend a lot of time working on that deal. That was one of my proudest accomplishments in boxing, not only in the ring, but just getting a Jordan deal, official Jordan deal for Triple G. Now he's a Jordan athlete.
Crazy.
They were making Jordan shoes, custom Jordan shoes for him. We flew up there and they were like asking him his design and what type of material, what type of rubber do you want on the sole of your shoe, what colors do you want, what type of design do you do. I mean, the
whole deal.
The type of detail they went through to produce those Jordan shoes was amazing. And I was really proud of that. Every time I looked at that Jordan logo on his trunks, I'm like, I did that deal.
I got something. So I read something that you played a part. Tell me if it's true, and if it is true, how did that come to fruition? Is that you have with Inoue a Inoue fight?
Oh, yeah.
His first fight in America, in the U.S.
Well, we were having such success with Triple G, and then and this kind of goes to show you the value I like to give to the fans is because we had Triple G. And I was looking for a good co-feature fighter for Triple G. And Chocolatito was there. He was with Mr. Honda, one of the nicest guys, most humble guys that you want to meet in boxing. But it was such a great 1-2 punch. You had Triple G as the co-feature. Chocolatito as a co-feature. And then Triple G is the main event. And at the time, that in the heyday, they were 1 or 2 in the world pound-for-pound ratings. So I think it's the only time in history, and probably the only time it's going to happen, that you have the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter and number 2 pound-for-pound fighter on the same show. And we did that for like 4 different times. And tremendous success with it. And then Peter Nelson from HBO, got to give him credit, where he said, okay, Chocolatito's getting such a great reaction from the fans as the co-feature, let's give him his own date. And then it's like, okay, you got to match up 2 guys, they're super flyweights. And then it's like, okay, there's a few other guys that are all world-class fighters. And you had like Estrada, then you had Quadras, then you had Sistercut Sorungvasai. You had all these great guys that are with those small fighters at 112, 115 pounds. They're all willing to fight each other. Like the heavyweights, the welterweights, the middleweight, they don't want to fight each other. Like the champions don't want to fight each other. Triple G, we couldn't pay enough for. I mean, guys were negotiating like it was literally like it was their last fight. Like this was going to be their retirement fight. They had to make so much money fighting Triple G that if they never fought again, they would be able to take care of their family. That's how they were negotiating. And it was like multiples of the highest they've ever gotten paid. I'm like, well, don't you want to fight for his 3 belts? I mean, I've never, out of all the guys I worked with, the Klitschko brothers, all the Shane Mosley, whatever it is, like they were world champions and fighters wanted to fight for that title. And when I was calling other champions or like number 1 contenders, whatever, you want to fight Triple G? It was the funniest thing because I would always keep Peter Nelson in the loop. And sometimes he'd even be on a conference call and they would say, yeah, we'll fight Triple G, just not next. It was, and we were going to make a T-shirt, Triple G, just not next. It was like I heard that so many times. Like they didn't want to say they didn't want to fight him, but they weren't trying to fight him in the next fight. So it was bizarre. But yeah. So Chocolatito, we made a Superfly series for Chocolatito, and the point I was making is that Chocolatito was under contract with me at the time with Triple G Promotions or K2 Promotions. He was with Mr. Honda, but I wanted to put him on the show because I wanted to give that value to the fans. A lot of promoters will only put on fighters that they have under contract, and I was just trying to put on the best shows. Then we did the Superfly shows, And I had we had out of like the 3 HBO fights, 6 fighters. I think I don't think any one of those was signed to me, but I wanted to put on the best fighters, the best shows for the fans, and in a way was one of those fighters. He was with Top Rank at the time, or he was with a Japanese promoter at the time, and Mr. Honda coordinated that deal. And sure enough, we had the U.S. debut of the Monster in a way on HBO on a Superfly show on the undercard of Chocolatito.
Guys, I wanted to bring that point out just because the big narrative right now is that when is Inoue going to fight in America? He has fought in America.
He's fought here
already,
before,
so
yeah.
the
Yeah,
man,
that was
Tom
the
Loeffler
US
brought
debut.
Inoue to America for his first debut. So
Facts.
So I just wanted to make that point because we can stop with the narrative when he's
He's fought here.
He's fought here already. Yeah.
And he was on HBO, so you definitely should have caught that one. But that was years ago. I think that might have been 2017, 2018. I'm not exactly sure when that was, but it was a number of years ago.
I know you got a Lakers game to get to with your boy. It's going to be a great night tonight. I hope you're in a suite or courtside.
And got invited by one of our sponsors, by Torque Law.
It's going down. Shout out to Torque Law.
It is nice to have good sponsors, just like Royalty.
Yep. It was very important. We've been trying to get this interview in, and yes, today I interviewed Calum, but the primary purpose for me being here today was to interview you because I feel like you're one of the biggest unsung legends behind the scenes, and I feel like people need to know more about you, more about the you've done in boxing, because it's pivotal to a lot of other things that have taken place. And there's a lot of other things I wanted to ask you about the future, but I guess we'll watch this all unfold.
A lot of big things coming for the future, for sure.
Yes.
We saw an announcement yesterday that took a lot of people by storm, took the sports world by storm. So there's some great things coming for the sport of boxing.
Yes.
But you know, it's great to be recognized by that. I appreciate the interview, and I got voted into the National Boxing Hall of Fame this year. So
Facts.
that's nice to be recognized as well. We appreciate their recognition. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to leave the people with before we go today, Tom?
Just keep watching the fights. You know, Commerce Casino. We got a show coming up April 19th. Callum Walsh. St. Patty's Day weekend. That's a Sunday matinee show. The first time we're doing a Sunday show.
Fire.
It's at Sunday matinee the day before St. Patrick's Day. So all those Irish fans, they can come to New York, come see a Callum Walsh fight, all the other great Irish legends fighters on the show, and then go into St. Patrick's Day on Monday.
That's what we call pregame.
That's
Yes.
pretty good. We used to do some great tailgates for those Superfly shows and the Triple G shows. We used to do some great tailgating parties at the Forum and at SubHub, for sure. But yeah, just watching the fights and look for some future announcements. We're going to have some real exciting news for boxing fans.
Amazing. Make sure you guys check out Tom Loeffler's Instagram. Make sure you guys watch all the fights on UFC Fight Pass. All of our Instagrams are in the beginning of this episode. The UFC Fight Pass link to Calum's fight is in the description of this video. Highly appreciate all you guys. Make sure you follow 360 Promotions as well on Instagram. This has been the Casual Experts Podcast. We're out of here, buckaroos.
Cheers.
You're just a casual.